What is the difference between typhoons, cyclones, and hurricanes? Now, the short answer to that question is actually there is no difference. They're both intense, large-scale areas of low pressure that take place when there's warm tropical waters. So the only difference is whereabouts they're located across the globe. So if they occur in the Atlantic or Northeast Pacific, they're called hurricanes. If they take place in the Northwest Pacific, they're known as typhoons. And if they take place in the South Pacific or across the Indian Ocean, they're known as cyclones. But they're all pretty much the same thing, and they all need similar ingredients to get going. So one of them is warm tropical waters. So sea surface temperatures need to be around 26.5 degrees or higher. They also need to occur around 5 degrees north or south of the equator in order to spin up into storms. And also you need just the right amount of wind shear, which is the change of wind speed and direction as you move up into the atmosphere. Because if you have too much wind shear, actually that tears the storm apart and that halts development. So you just need the right amount. It's actually quite little amounts of wind shear. But in order to be classed as a hurricane, a typhoon or a cyclone, you need wind speeds of 74 miles per hour or more. And actually across the globe, we've got quite a lot of activity, as Alex was saying, particularly in the North Atlantic. But before we talk about that, I do just want to move over to the Northwest Pacific, where once again, we've had quite a lot of activity. So if I just zoom in here and move over to Saturday, here where we can see the winds spinning around. This has actually just been it's just gone down actually to a tropical storm below, I think it's been named, but it's likely as we head towards the weekend and the winds intensify, it will move back up to typhoon status. So this is likely to bring in some pretty strong winds, particularly across parts of Vietnam. We could potentially see gusts of around 130 miles per hour. Still a lot of uncertainty as to what the max gust speed is going to be, but some intense strong winds. And not only this, but it's going to bring in some heavy outbreaks of rain over the weekend, particularly across parts of Vietnam, also southern China and parts of Laos too. And this comes straight after another tropical storm, which we've had earlier in the week, and it was actually named Typhoon Ragasa. And that also brought some strong winds and heavy outbreaks of rain. So not long after, we've got another typhoon moving through, so not much time in order to recover from the impacts. Let's move back over to the North Atlantic, because there is a chance that this could potentially impact the weather that we see across the UK after next week. So if I just zoom in a little over here, so this area of low pressure here, this is currently over the Azores. This is what we've been talking about through much of the week. This is now ex-tropical storm Gabrielle, currently moving across the Azores. We've had wind speed gusts of around 96 miles per hour recorded here. Now, we were looking earlier in the week at the potential tracks, whether it was going to track slightly further north and impact parts of the UK, but we haven't really seen that track develop. It more just created some uncertainty across the UK weather for this weekend. Now we're a little bit more certain that ex-tropical storm Gabrielle is actually going to track eastwards, potentially bringing some strong winds and heavy outbreaks of rain to parts of Portugal and also parts of Spain, or it may just kind of spin around coastal areas. So still definitely one to watch. And it's been with us for a fair few days, all because it didn't really get caught up by a strong or significant jet stream. But if we move our way further west, there's a couple of other developments that we need to keep an eye on. Actually, this morning, this one here has now been named Hurricane Humberto. So this, once again, some strong winds, some heavy outbreaks of rain, quite an intense area of low pressure just to the southeast of the US here. But there's also this other area of development, which could potentially become another tropical cyclone or potentially another hurricane. And if so, this would be named Imelda. But this one is a little bit more intense, just purely because of its location to land. So notice it's just off the coast of Miami, quite close to the Bahamas. So there's the potential there for it to create more impacts with its strong winds and heavy outbreaks of rain, purely because of the location of this area. So more population of people that it could potentially impact. Not only this, but as we head further ahead, there's a chance that these two developments could also dance around each other a little bit. It's actually called the Fujiwara effect, where these two kind of dance around and potentially create even more severe impacts here as they do so. Now, in relation to UK weather, they can create a bit of difficulty. If we just zoom out and move back over to the UK, I'm going to go over to Monday. Notice that high pressure is starting to build back through. So the southern half of the UK, for example, is likely, as we head into next week, going to see dry, settled conditions once again, some sunny spells. Low pressure never too far away, so the northwest could potentially still see some rain as we head into next week. But then after that, it's all very much dependent on what happens with these two, well, the Hurricane Humberto and potentially a secondary one, because if they start to get picked up by the jet stream, they could potentially drift towards us in the UK, or we could see something similar to what happened with Gabrielle and actually just drift further south, and all it really creates is uncertainty in our forecast. So just to kind of illustrate this, I've got what we call a Hofmöller diagram showing the pressure differences in the past as we move higher up on the graph and also in the future as we head further down. This horizontal line is about the latitude of the UK. So where these lines meet, this is whereabouts the UK is. So if we look at point number 1, you can see by these green colours, that's largely low pressure dominating. So as it drifts in from the west, this is for this weekend, we've got area of low pressure, that frontal system moving through, bringing us some unsettled conditions. Now, as we head into early next week, we see more of these yellows and these orange colours start to move through on the graph. So that's high pressure building back through what I just showed you earlier, some more settled conditions. But notice on point 2, if we look over to the west, once again, a return of these more green colours, so low pressure potentially starting to move through in from the west. And then if we look at point 3, that's high pressure eventually breaking down, and possibly as a result of Hurricane Humberto drifting across the Atlantic and breaking down that high pressure, and there's the potential there for us to see some unsettled conditions. But the main point is, because of what's happening over across the Atlantic, that creates a lot of uncertainty in our forecast as we head over after next week.